Welcome everyone. It's great to have you with us. Cool. My name, by the way, is Tim Haycock. I'm one of the directors here at High Performer Building. High Performer Building is a brand that we have developed and designed to help sell houses and win tenders. It is about telling the story and just highlighting some of the core products that go into the home and some of the quality choices that a builder or an architect has made, and putting that in a nice package that mums and dads who are looking to buy a house or build a house can clearly see some of these more structural components that they don't normally get told about, and why some perform better than others. So that's who we are, that's what we do. But I want to know the intent of this webinar series is not that we are trying to make it commercial. We really are passionate and think that there is a critical conversation that needs to happen in the building industry. And this downtime has presented an awesome opportunity for us to stop, because we've had to, because there's not much we can do at the moment. But we've got an opportunity to stop and really look at what's working and what's not. So I'm just telling you about who we are, because I think it's important that you know who we are and who's sponsoring this thing. Now, there was the idea that maybe we hire somebody or bring in some talent, get somebody that everybody knows that, can front the camera and communicate really well. And if you're sitting there thinking, yeah, that would have been a really good idea, then all I have to say to you is, I'm sorry, you're stuck with me. And here's why. We are really, really passionate about the building industry in New Zealand. And you can hire talent, but you can't hire passion. So I'm sorry, but you're stuck with me. The New Zealand building industry can be a really tough place. We find it's an industry that's resistant to change. There's a lot of complacency. There's inefficiencies everywhere you look. It's an industry that seems to be driven by fear and a lot of arse covering. And the problem with that is that we're not producing our best work. This isn't resulting in the best outcomes for Kiwis who are buying and living in these homes that we're building and these buildings that we're building. So you may find you agree or disagree with that, and I'm completely open to there being different levels with which that resonates with you. Some people are really onto it and trying to push the envelope. Others are just kind of following along, doing what we've always done. But I would say, as a generalization, we've got some work to do as an industry. If we are brutally honest, I don't think that the New Zealand public looks at our industry and sees the most advanced, efficient, leading edge industry in the world. And the other thing is that working in the industry isn't always that fun either. We're also busy avoiding risk and passing blame, and just trying to cover our ass and not get in trouble and not stuff anything up, that we are missing some of the joy that brought us into this space in the first place. I think if you went to your guidance counsellor in high school and said, hey, look, I like staying within the lines, I like following the rules, don't like making mistakes, they weren't going to turn around to you and say, oh, you should become a builder or an architect. That's a great occupation for you. So, but I think that our industry at its core is really passionate about creating something out of nothing. And that comes with risk, that comes with experimentation, and that comes with making mistakes. And we've had some pretty big ones in the past as an industry, and we're left feeling a bit gun shy, and fair enough, but maybe it's time during this downtime to reassess some things that we're doing, because I feel like a lot of change has been so stilted. We're so scared of another leaky building syndrome that we're really not pushing forward, and that's not who we are, and that's not who we are as Kiwis. We're cutting edge Kiwis. We like to push the envelope. So we need to know that the building's going to perform, and that's good, and we never want to drop that. But if we're so worried about not doing a bad job, then how are we actually going to focus on doing a really good job? And I think now more than ever, it's not the time to be covering our asses. I think we need to unify as an industry and get focused, and let's come out of this thing having had some really brutally honest conversations with each other about what's working, what's not, and how we're going to do better. So stay engaged with us. We would like to hear from you. Obviously, first 4 seminars we've got up and going, and you know what they are, but we're really open to your feedback around what are some of your pain points, some of your frustrations in the industry, some things that we can maybe help orchestrate some conversations around. We don't just have to do webinars, we can look at other formats, and totally happy to do that. So you can contact us on hello@highperformer.co.nz, or you can jump on our website or our Facebook page, but we really would like you to engage feedback. This is not about growing our business, this is about starting a conversation with the industry, and we want to hear from you. So we're going to get going with Cameron now. Cameron, Chief Economist of the ANZ Bank for 11 years. Before that was National on the team there, National Bank. He's been at Treasury, he's been at Statistics New Zealand. While he was at ANZ, his team was consistently ranked #1 for their analysis of the economy. Cameron is pragmatic, he holds no punches, and he calls a spade, which is exactly what we're after in this industry. He doesn't have a crystal ball. He does have a wealth of knowledge and an understanding of the macroeconomics and some of what might be going on. Most of that we can't change, but I think, you know, this is going to be brutal. We're in for a really shitty time coming up, but better that we go into this with our eyes wide open. Better that we go into it with a sense of unity rather than backstabbing and trying to cut each other out. So, and also, you know, this is our chance, as bad as it may be, to take some ownership of our future as an industry. Without further ado, I'm just going to bring Cameron in.
All right, we'll sort of kick things off. I thought what I'd do firstly is just use an analogy in regard to how I'm thinking about things. So if you ever look at the New Zealand economy for the past 20 to 30 years, think about us as driving a Ford Falcon that's been stuck in 3rd gear. Now, it's been a reasonably nice place to bring up kids and go about our everyday lives, but in a relative sense, compared to a lot of other countries around the globe, we've actually been getting poorer, particularly versus the likes of Australia. Now, I'm going to take you through some details of what we're facing, and there's no sugarcoating the obvious. Now, this is going to be one hell of a economic challenge with what we're facing, but what we also need to think is a lot more strategically about what the other side looks like and how we get that Ford Falcon out of 3rd gear and into 5th. And there's an old adage out there that's quite useful: never waste a crisis, because it's during a crisis that you start to crystallize a lot of different thinking, and people tend to be up for a bit of change. In a normal environment, people tend to be very resistant to change. So I'm going to take you through 7 or 8 sort of, you know, broad points in regard to how I'm seeing things. Look, firstly, there is some good news out there. If there's one place I'd like to be, I'm glad I'm in around the globe at the moment, it's in a little old New Zealand, you know, a country a mile away from anywhere else. In fact, I'd like to be living or working on a farm, to be perfectly honest. Yeah, if I have a look at what does New Zealand provide on the global stage, yeah, we provide food. Economic imperative for any country or government around the globe at the moment is to make sure the world can eat. And we're going to be calling on the farmers to do an awful lot of heavy lifting on behalf of the New Zealand economy over the next 12, 24, 36 months. And New Zealand is headed into what can only be described as a period of economic dislocation, and that's putting things pretty politely, in pretty good shape. Now, when you're in pretty good shape heading into things, it's going to minimise the damage. So if I go back and have a look at previous downturns, the likes of the GFC or the Asian crisis, and New Zealand went into those with an economy pretty well on its knees. Some of the stuff we were seeing across the construction sector, well, they're at the top of the cycle. We were building too many houses. The cycle turns, and then you've got a real problem. You've got a real glut. You've got to sort of clear the deck. This time around, we haven't had those same degree of vulnerabilities heading into this thing. In fact, as of 2 months ago, in fact, as of a month ago, the biggest problem for firms out there across New Zealand at the moment was finding skilled staff. And that's just a sign that we've headed into period of dislocation, challenge with a bit of momentum at our back. Now, that's not stopping us from heading into recession. But what it is it's going to help mitigate some of the downside because we don't have this huge array of what we call structural imbalances that mean the New Zealand needs an absolute purging on a whole lot of levels. What we've also seen is that the policy framework is working. The Reserve Bank stepped up, pretty big. They cut interest rates straight away. They're writing out some very big checks supporting the banking system. Thankfully, the banking system has been, building up what's called their capital buffers for that sort of, rainy day, or should we say tornado. Well, the fact that they're reasonably well capitalised means they can provide liquidity across the economy, of course, subject to firms remaining solvent and that sort of stuff. But we're in far better shape than where we were in, say, 2007, 2008. The previous government got a hell of a lot of criticism for focusing on paying down debt. They got debt down to low, and of course the current government took it even lower. Well, thank God for that, because we need that money for the rainy day. Your government debt is going to go from 20% of GDP to anywhere between 50 and 100% of GDP. Now, we can do that temporarily. We can't do that permanently, but we've got the luxury that we have saved for that rainy day. And we're going to need to deploy an awful lot of cash because it is a torrential downpour out there. But the spirit of what I'm trying to say here is that, look, the proper things are taking place to try to minimise the economic collateral damage. Is it going to be sufficient to avert a very deep and prolonged downturn? The answer is no. But I think New Zealand, the extent of the downturn or the cleaning out we are likely to experience is going to be somewhat softer than I'm expecting out of an awful lot of other countries around the globe. Point two, just want to talk quickly about the whole idea of sort of disruption. Look, I'll give you a heads up. Whether it would have been COVID-19 or something else, the New Zealand economy was due a downturn. It happens every sort of 10 years. You go back and have a look at 2009. Go back 97, 98. You go back and have a look at 87 to 1992. Then go back 10 years and have a look at 1977, 78. There's a lot of a playbook here where we tend to see some sort of economic shock or some shape or form comes along every decade. So on some levels, we shouldn't be surprised. I know some people are probably looking at their equity portfolio and thinking, God, I'm getting carded here. Go back and have a look in 2019, equities are up 30%. So the pullback we've seen today is probably not even given up the gains people made in 2019. More broadly, when I think about disruption, I think there's a hell of a lot of complacency out there across New Zealand. Whether it be COVID-19 or some form of technology shock or an earthquake, Mother Nature, drought conditions in rural line regions, government policy changes, we are seeing disruption on a massive numbers of levels. There was a survey out in 2018 by Suncorp that asked firms, have you been disrupted in some shape or form? And 43%, almost half of firms said yes, they'd seen some form of disruption in the past 5 years. The interesting thing about that survey was that when firms were asked to look forward about disruption, as opposed to look in the rearview mirror, the number went from 43 to 36%. Yeah, so that is New Zealand firms that in a world of fast-paced technological innovation, changing weather patterns, the environment's obviously a lot more important out there. Firms were sending the message, we expect the pace of change to slow. Now that is called smoking pot. What was that survey actually telling us? It was telling us that New Zealand firms have got that she'll be right attitude. Now, I'll handle disruption, I'll handle dislocation when it turns up at our doorstep. If you ever look at something such as the construction sector or the property market, if I ever look at property valuations across New Zealand at the moment, Auckland trading at 9 times incomes, that is an unsustainable position. The top issue for households across New Zealand has been housing for a number of years. Why? Because it's so damn unaffordable. The market just does not work. So whether we focus on COVID-19 or some other sort of global shock of some shape or form, my personal view was that the construction sector in some shape or form was going to get disrupted. It was primed for a massive shake-up. Obviously we've seen issues between the construction sector and the government trying to work out sort of things, but bigger issue to me behind the scenes is how do we store trust within the sector? And trust is a pretty important word, but it's easier said than done to restore it across a sector. Point 3, just quickly, the reality check in regard to what we're going through. I don't think any economist with any conviction can give a very firm view on what the depth of this downturn is going to be. No one knows how long we're going to be in isolation, but what we do know is that the other side, things are going to look fundamentally different. I tell people, don't think about the global financial crisis as a benchmark, because the global financial crisis was a conventional cycle, what's called a V. You go down hard and you bounce out the other side. To me, well, this one's an awful lot deeper. When we do turn on the lights and we go back to work, you are going to see a partial bounce out the other side. It will not be a full bounce because an awful lot of firms are not going to be around. And then we're going to get into a long, drawn-out period where things are going to be hellishly difficult. If the benchmark, or there's something to probably think about, go back for those that are around and think about 1987 and the period we faced right up until 1992, 93. It took until 1994 before the economy really started to fire up again. What happened was that we band-aged problems, particularly in the commercial property arena, and then finally we ran out of bandages, and then lo and behold, you got a bit of another economic collapse in 1991, and we needed to undertake some pretty harsh economic decisions for those people that were around to remember what was called the mother of all budgets. What we're getting hit from at the moment is effectively 3 black swans. Black Swan 1 was the initial experience of COVID-19, which basically threw the global supply chain into disarray because we shut the biggest factory, which was China. And no one turned up to work. And of course, China is the big factory supplying inputs into other factories around the globe. So when that factory shuts up shop, it has real economic implications for the supply chain all around the globe. Black Swan 2 has been the oil market. So if you ever look at oil prices, they've collapsed from about $60 a barrel down to slightly above 20. What that has set off is a chain of events in credit markets, because the energy sector, particularly in America, has got a hell of a lot of debt. And debt's your friend at the top of the cycle when asset prices are moving up and you've got cash flow. Or debt is your enemy when the cycle turns and the sales line is going south, or for a lot of industries, there are no sales as well. So what we're now starting to see is, of course, credit markets are starting to freeze up. And we've seen banking stocks come under a fair bit of pressure in the last 24 hours. Earthquake 3 or Black Swans 3 has just been the decision to move to isolation to try to contain this damn thing. Now that is a tectonic shock of massive proportions. My own personal view, is that I think New Zealand will contain this. Being in a small island is hellishly good in regard to this. Do I think self-isolation is going to end after 1 month? The answer is no. I think we're staring down the barrel here of probably 2. And you can bet your bottom dollar that when we do clean this sort of thing up, border control is going to remain for a very long time until we see some sort of vaccine on the other side, which potentially could be anything up to a year away. So buckle down. It's just going to be interesting. In regard to the economic outlook out there, in the near term, I think the New Zealand economy is going to contract by, say, 5 to 10%. Now, some sectors are going to do better than that. The digital economy is obviously getting turbocharged. Everybody's turning up to the supermarket. Liquor sales are going through the roof. Some other sectors, such as tourism, particularly international, turn out the lights. That is a $17 billion earner. You're going to see markets, Queenstown, are going to go through very difficult economic times. Glass half full. About 3 hours down the road at a place called Dunedin, they need construction staff to build a hospital. So I suspect you're going to see an awful lot of people pack their bags out of Queenstown and shift 3 hours down the road because there will be work available. But some markets are going to take this, pretty hard. Realistically, we're going to see the unemployment rate is going to be double digit, and it's going to get there pretty quick. Glass half full. There's going to be no shortage of workers. We might have a bit of a problem in regard to their skill bases, but now's the time to be starting to think about how do we give those people different skills? What do we need to be doing in regard to the education sector to make sure that we're coming out the other side? What have we seen? We've seen a massive response. The Reserve Bank stepped up to the plate. The Reserve Bank is prepared to buy $30 billion worth of government bonds by what's called quantitative easing. Grant Robertson is writing out cheques galore. The government in the year to June will borrow $25 billion. I suspect they're going to be borrowing anything from 25 to 50 billion in the next 12 months beyond that. But we're able to do that because we've put a bit of that money away for the rainy day. Is it going to alleviate or mitigate a huge recession? The answer is no, but it's about trying to stop the extent of that fall on the other side. The way to think about it is probably to think about it as a bungee cord being attached. We're going to bounce out the other side, but the other side, it is not going to be a V. We get a partial bounce, but then we're going to get into some real hard slog, which I guess leads me into another point. What does the other side look like? I think the other side looks fundamentally different. Normally we go through a recession and life goes on as normal. I think this one's a groundbreaker in regard that is going to make us fundamentally reassess our lives. If you ever look at the education sector, for instance, universities are now going 100% online, same with schooling. Why on earth would we go back to a 100% offline proposition? It makes absolutely no sense. Did the education fraternity sector need to be moving towards online propositioning? The answer is yes. What is this going to do? It is just going to accelerate. Now we've had the biggest trial in our history that, hey, presto, working from home actually works. It's no longer faces practical constraints. Well, there might be some practical constraints, but we can do it. And I don't think people are going to go rushing back into work in an office space when they've been walking around in t-shirts and shorts doing their work from home. Obviously, the tourism sector is going to face a hell of a long time before it comes back out the other side. What does that mean for hotels in regard to how they're going to get deployed? What are alternative uses for hotels? Businesses, households are going through a big economic shock here. I think people are going to come out the other side and try to rebuild their precautionary savings buffers. And they're not going to go racing back into spending a whole lot of money when they're running down their leave balances, so they won't want to take a holiday and they don't have too much spare cash. Anything discretionary within any firm at the moment, strike a line through it. Just get rid of it. You need to maintain a core element of functionality, but anything discretionary, you just get rid of. Because for a lot of firms out there at the moment, this is just pure and simple about economic survival. New Zealand is going to have to reinvest in healthcare. What's going to be our capability on the other side? If I have a look at 9/11, what was the response to 9/11? Well, all of a sudden you got security screening. Well, we've now got another risk we need to manage around the globe is the transmission of viruses. What is security now going to look like at international airports? What is the appetite for people to travel in a new economic environment? If I think about supply chain, we've been in an environment where China has been at the epicenter of the global supply chain. For retail-based goods, construction materials, or these sort of things. Why? Because they've been cheaper. But that supply chain is now being threatened by some major events. So you're going to see boardrooms, CEOs start to have some discussions going forward on the other side in regard to the appropriateness of that supply chain. Maybe we need to get into an environment where we need to onshore the production of some stuff as opposed to have a completely offshored model. We're already seeing pressure in regard to that from America anyway, for outsourced goods that were being produced in China, for that manufacturing capability to get returned to America. Is that going to be as cost efficient as the Chinese model? The answer is probably no. But this is about risk management, not just about price. And what we've been through here is a big economic shock that's now going to start to make us think about risk management. And risk management is not just about price. So there could be some opportunities here in New Zealand where we start to think about, what would be required to have more manufacturing capability on the ground. How do we need to start to redesign the education sector? Moving on, I think we're going through what I call a big reset. If you break it down, pretty easily, a lot of investments out there for the past few years, people weren't getting compensated for risk. So if you ever look at, yields on residential property, incredibly low. If you look at people jumping into commercial property in the past couple of years, mum and dad, household investors didn't like the residential yields. They hoover up a commercial property because it's 2 percentage points higher. Well, economic reality, it's 2 percentage points higher because you've got this thing called tenant risk. So I think we are going to go through a reset where the price of risk is going to go up. What does that mean? It means that asset values come down on the other side. You think about, we just saw Kathmandu's out there doing a capital raise. They had to discount the guts out of the share price to entice investors in. There's capital around the globe and locally that is looking for a home. Money will get enticed into new activities. The big issue is going to be at what price. And it will not be the price where assets were trading 3 to 4 weeks ago. This is one hell of a reset. We are going to see some pressure, some distress stuff. The key pocket we will see distress is commercial property and the business sector. If I have a look at bank lending by size, is about 275 billion worth of home lending, and that's going to face some pressure as people lose their jobs. But by and large, people will work like hell. Probably the wrong example, but because there won't be too much work out there to pay the mortgage. Where banks historically have taken big hits in regard to provisioning their credit losses has been in the business sector, and particularly in regard to commercial property. The dairy sector was the one that we were most concerned about 3 months ago. I think a lot of those concerns are now going to temporarily be parked because rural New Zealand is going to look an awful lot healthier than an awful lot of others because they've got cash flow. Commodity prices have still come down, but they've still got cash flow. Moving on, looking at specifically the construction sector specifically, we are going to see an infrastructure program that's going to be bigger than Ben-Hur. Yeah, it will be scaled up. It will be a big part of getting New Zealand back on a firmer footing in the so-called new environment. The commercial property market, I have a lot of concerns about. I suspect that the pipeline of work into that sector is going to disappear very, very quickly. Residential, we don't have those same late cycle excesses that we've had normally in regard to building too many houses. I think we're going to start to see some funny things. People are going to work out their houses are too small to work in. So suddenly people are going to look at trading to a different house to make that home office a reality. But we're going to see pressure on house prices. Unemployment rate moves up, house prices move down. The Reserve Bank has blown all its bullets in regard to interest rates. Normally, the other end of the cycle is driven by monetary policy cutting rates. Interest rates come down. That's hellishly good for asset prices as the economy starts to move on the other side. This time around, I don't think you're going to see a big bounce up in asset prices on the other side when the economy does finally turn the corner. I think we're going to get stuck in a slow, grind environment, a little bit like what we saw 87 to 1992. But the obvious upfront hit this time around is going to be an awful lot bigger. Just finally, I just thought I'd talk about what are we going to need going forward? What we're going to need is a lot more than the Reserve Bank and the government just spending money. If I have a look at the experience of Japan, for instance, Japan's had record low interest rates for a long time. Japan's been borrowing money, building roads, bridges, you name it, infrastructure pipeline work for Africa. Has the Japanese economy really flourished in the past 20 years? The answer is no. What has been the missing ingredient in Japan? It's what's called microeconomic reform. Microeconomics, whether you be in business or in government, are all those little things that are in front of your own eyes that you can control. Those little levers that you can pull that make the difference between a good business and a great business. And what we're going to need across New Zealand is firms to have a ruthless obsession, and I don't use that term lightly, with getting their house in order and improving their microeconomic foundations. And now's the time to be, don't stay on the couch, get off the couch, reinvest in yourself, upskill, train. You've now got time on your side. But what we're going to need is some really blue sky thinking out of the government in regard to what the economic future looks like. Some of the political driven ideology in regard to what they've done is going to need to be parked. We're going to need to embrace foreign direct investment. We're going to need money pouring in here. We're going to need global partnerships. Now's the time to fundamentally redesign the education sector. Those tertiary training institutions, not just the universities, but how we train people for the trades in regard to short-term courses. Get them in there for a week, get them back to work, these sort of things. But we need real blue sky thinking, because there's an old adage out there that I sort of live by, and I think I said it earlier on. Look, never waste a crisis. It's the only time you can foster an awful lot of change, but we're going to need local government and central government to step up to the plate. There's a bit of a call to arms here. We're going to need to get the right people in the right places because quality is going to count. We're going to need to make some big, bold decisions, not just across the government level, but all across the industry level, if we want to get that car going from third and into fourth. I'm pretty upbeat about what this could mean for New Zealand, particularly compared to an awful lot of other countries around the globe, such as Australia. I think they've got their absolute heads in the sands in regard to what's been going on for a whole lot of time. But knuckle down, it is going to be the most distressing economic environment I've seen in my working history. It is going to be difficult. Get out there, support each other. Mental health is going to be a big issue over the coming few years, but knuckle up, because there could be some real exciting times on the other side. I think there's going to be two sorts of firms out there. there's going to be what's called the hunters and the hunted. Those with strong balance sheets with better microeconomic foundations. Look, Christmas is around the corner because you're probably going to be able to pick up some competition. You're going to be able to drive market share, and you're going to be in a strong position to execute on well-priced deals over the coming 12 to 24 months. But be patient, because this one's going to take a little bit of time, I suspect, to unfold, just as what it did between 1987 and 1992. So I'll stop there, and we can probably get into some questions.
It's pretty brutal, but it is the reality. Okay, so one question: with the current situation, how long can a government borrow money to prop up the companies that are running negative?
The government does not have a bottomless pit of money. They like to think they do, but they don't. If I go back and have a look at 1991-92, which preceded the mother of all, sorry, 1991, which preceded the mother of all budgets, net government debt got to 50% of GDP, and the rating agencies were knocking on our door. Now, the rating agencies are going to come knocking on our door pretty damn soon too. Now, we will get a credit downgrade. As a one-notch downgrade at the end of the world? The answer is no. You're still at the quality end of the spectrum. But it just sort of illustrates is that there's no bottomless pit of money there. As the government needs to borrow more money, supply of bonds go up, or supply of bonds goes up, or so will the price, i.e. yields will need to rise. The Reserve Bank will try to contain this by buying bonds themselves, but they do not have a bottomless pit of money as well. So we're going to need to think very carefully about what we need on the other side, and the economic imperative here is going to be getting growth back across the economy. And this is why we're going to need that call to arms to really make sure that we go back up the other side pretty quickly, because otherwise we're saddling the next generation of kids. They're going to be faced with higher taxes, less spending. They're going to bear the brunt of this economic adjustment if we do not get strong growth on the other side of this.
What do you think the projected timeline is for hitting the wall? Have we already hit it, or do you think there might be a delay in the industry? There's projects everyone's in the middle of. You assume a good chunk of those at least are going to carry on. Is there a delay, or have we hit the wall already? When do you think that might happen?
Look, the government stuff will continue, and they'll work pretty proactively to try to get cash into people's pockets. But if I have a look at the corporate sector or anybody out there at the moment, households, you've got three imperatives beyond your health and look after your family. Imperative one is cash flow, imperative two is liquidity, and imperative three is risk management. So I suspect firms will be looking at, they're going to need to shore up their balance sheets. Now that means anything discretionary is going to get parked. Stuff that was on the drawing board, people are going to go back and have another look at that sort of stuff.
Yeah. The other one is, so then what do you think we should be focusing our attention on? What should we be trying to build as an industry? Where are we going to, other than some of that infrastructure stuff, there's a lot of small construction firms versus large construction firms. How do you think each of those are going to go? Where do you think each should focus their attention to come out strong on this?
Well, everybody's response is going to be fundamentally different depending on the strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and challenges that they face. But I think we're going to need firms to be a lot more lateral in their thinking in regard to where those opportunities could look like. You think here at the moment, people are working from home. A lot of people exposed are going to have to think how they right-size their home for a home office. So there you got a surge in work in regard to interior related stuff. Hotels down in Queenstown are going to get absolutely tanked. They are not a sustainable viability proposition. What are we going to do with them? What are the opportunities there that we could do with these facilities? Might be a hell of a lot of cheap batches down there coming on the market in the next 12 to 24 months, but then you start to think about renovation work. Look, we know the construction sector, people have been around a lot. The construction sector historically has 3 gears: fifth, neutral, and reverse. Now, the good thing about what we've been through of late is that we had a real robust level of activity, and it was pretty consistent for a number of years. And that's important because it's going to mitigate, I think, some of the downside risk. But there is still downside risk because the economic imperative for everybody out there at the moment is liquidity, cash flow, and risk management.
What values of development land, commercial, rental properties, and rents? Did you catch?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah. Just what's your predictions in terms of valuations of development land, commercial and residential buildings, and then also rents?
Or developed land, or even undeveloped land, or it's going to get torched. How low the downside is, I just don't know. But you wouldn't want to be a developer down in Queenstown or Wanaka with a whole lot of land you still got to sell, because I don't think there's going to be too many bids. If I have a look at residential property, how did residential property perform during the GFC? Prices fell 7%. There's your starting point. I think it'll be a double-digit decline. And normally what happens with residential is that the Reserve Bank comes in on their white horse, and we're off to the races again on lower interest rates. Well, the Reserve Bank doesn't have the white horse to come in on at the moment because interest rates are already pretty damn low. But let's have a look at this through an alternative lens. It is absolutely nuts that Auckland house prices are 9 times incomes. It's not a sustainable position in the first place. We kind of hoped that the adjustment would be gradual, where house prices would grow for a number of years at a slower rate than incomes. Well, that's not going to take place this time around. Think about people that have been building properties or buying these little boxes with a view to Airbnb them. Well, income from that sort of stuff going to zero. What's the value proposition of those sort of things? Unfortunately, we are going to see some pockets, select niches in the market are going to face some real tough times. Flip side, I'm originally from Central Otago, brought up in Alexandra Clyde. I'm looking at Central Otago at the moment and rubbing my hands with glee.
What do you think is the impact of the RMA in this space, and if there's an opportunity to see some change finally in there, what would you like to see happen?
Without going into detailed specifics, I sort of abide by the term, KISS, keep it simple sport. I think we've just made systems unnecessarily too complicated. So let's get back to something that's, first and foremost, we've got to reduce costs. We've got to streamline systems, and there's a whole lot of ways we can do that in regard to online capability, that sort of stuff, and where the sector is going on certain levels. But we need to see, I think, a response a little bit similar to what happened down in Christchurch post the earthquake, where we just streamlined the process to get stuff done really quickly, because speed to market is going to be critical in the current instance. We do not want a sustained push up in unemployment for an extended period of time, because then you're going to see social dislocation follow economic dislocation. What does that look like? Crime rates start to go through the roof. You have a missing generation of kids that did not have skills to get back into the workforce.
What did you think about this morning in terms of government's done too little, too late? Agree, disagree?
Well, you think about the decision they had to take in regard to shutting borders. And you can see criticisms on both sides. All right? Yeah, people say it was too late. Well, you think about the economic carnage that is also doing across New Zealand at the moment. There was a poll out in the Herald today that actually tells us that people are now a lot more concerned about their jobs as opposed to COVID-19. Yeah, the longer we are in lockdown, you're going to start to see the social fabric really get tested here, because people are going to start to think about their livelihoods, their business versus health risks. And you're going to see, I think, a big portion of the population suddenly say, look, let's go the herd mentality approach. Now, that will be a disaster for the healthcare side of the equation, but we're going to get into those sort of debates the longer this lockdown ends. At the moment, I think we've got a bit of a fighting charge here. The word kindness and all these sort of things are being thrown around. You watch the coming couple of weeks, the longer we're in lockdown, the more people's patience is going to get tested.
I've just got one here saying New Zealand is 29th in the OECD in terms of cost of construction and affordable construction. What is important to get costs down in construction of houses, and how important is scale in getting costs down?
Well, scale is a big part of it, but there's a whole lot of things. It just seems to be the whole construction supply chain all the way along the way just seems unnecessarily complicated. But probably the biggest change we need, and we're going to see it, is that the price of land's got to come down. I think the price of land is going to come down a very long way, particularly in some pockets of New Zealand.
Do you think, if you look at a development, the cost of construction versus the end sale point is probably only 30% of the total cost. So obviously, like you say, land, that'll drop down by supply and that sort of thing. But a big factor at the moment is these development costs and infrastructure costs. Do you have thoughts around how that could be tackled better in order to help bring down costs that aren't really contributing?
Yeah, well, let's think about that a different way. We've seen a massive response here from central government. They're leaning on their own balance sheet. They are literally firing off bazooka after bazooka. Where is local government New Zealand? What's been their policy prescription? Where's their assistance package? Where are they out there in regard to discussion on rates or what they might be able to do, even provide temporary relief to stimulate the construction sector, get them going? It's a sector out there at the moment that I'm just bemused why they haven't been at the table. They've got big balance sheets like central government does as well. They need to be mobilising those balance sheets, but they also need to be thinking differently about what they can do to support businesses. And at the moment, firms need costs to come down. Give them some temporary near-term relief.
What do you think of the government idea of them taking equity in essential companies?
That's going to take place. We're going to end up with a big pot of probably quasi-nationalised firms.
Do you see some of the big multinationals pulling out of New Zealand, or do you think we've got an opportunity to attract more in, or what's your thoughts there?
Well, if we can get the economic story right on the other side, a favourable place to invest that's got a good economic climate, supportive institutions, there's no reason why capital around the globe will not be deployed to New Zealand. Personally, I think New Zealand has got the opportunity to come out of this an awful lot better than an awful lot of other countries around the globe. Go back to one of the first things I said at the start. we produce food the world needs to eat. You know, what we need to be doing is executing an awful lot better around that in regard to making sure we're maximising value add. You know, are we doing that with the current model with the likes of Fonterra? The answer is no. So there needs to be shake-up after shake-up on multiple levels in regard to how we think about industry structures. My personal view is that I think there needs to be a huge shake-up across boards in New Zealand.
One other thing, because we're going to wrap up soon, but where can we go and get some accurate information? You know, outside having webinars with you every few weeks to get accurate data around what is happening, and in order to kind of keep our finger on the pulse of what's going forward. Is there resources you can point us towards? Do you have a blog or a newsletter or anything that people can sign up to, or is there anything we can do there?
Well, all the bank economic teams will have regular weekly newsletters that'll be coming up that'll keep you up to date with the broader economic picture. You know, but one of the issues we've got at the moment is that there's a lag between the economic data versus what's actually happening on the ground. You know, I think the government should be releasing weekly benefit numbers. Yeah, the sooner we get information out there, the better. I'd like to see Xero releasing some of their stuff as well in regard to people paying the bills, that sort of stuff. Yeah, the better we can get timely information as well. The problem is for a lot of all these individuals on this call, like a few hundred, it's time consuming for them to go sort of do it individually. It might make more sense for someone like me to put out a specific newsletter into you guys to keep you informed or abreast of things.
Yeah, great. Awesome. Well, thanks, Cameron. I think if we were all in the room together, you'd hear a large, if not somewhat somber applause right now. But really appreciate your thoughts. Really appreciate you taking the time, and yeah, we look forward to kind of touching base on and maybe hearing a bit more out of you and where we're going. So, cheers.
All the best.
Cheers. So, guys, again, next week we've got talking about financial resilience. So, some basic things. What do we need to be doing in the construction sector to be not making some of the mistakes we've made before? But also, I've asked her to say, you know, blank sheet of paper. We've got a bit of time. Let's dream a little bit. What are some of the structural and cultural issues in the financial side of this industry that we could maybe have a look at? The way we run contracts, the way we run retainers, and all of these different things. You know, there is some stuff that's not working, and maybe there's an opportunity now to shift some of that. Following that, the following week, we've got a panel looking at innovation, optimization, and process. You know, there's all sorts of new technologies in some ways it's all the same, just different. But at the end of the day, with technology, it's got to be deployed. There's a lot of companies that have somebody in charge of looking at innovation, but that person is doing it on the side of their regular day job, and they never actually deploy much of what they find. So we're going to look at that. And then we've got Louise, who is going to be bringing a fresh perspective on compliance, a word she'd rather I didn't use, rather that we look at performance. But I really like the way that Louise's mind works. She's been in that space for years, and that's awesome. So thanks for being with us, guys. I also just want to thank our clients for their support. Allied Concrete, J-Frame, Maglock, Sounddown, Mammoth Installation, BGC, The Roofing Store, USG Boral, Plasterboard, Deck Chair and Hydro Panel. These guys have supported us for years now, and they're hanging in with us now, so we really appreciate that, guys. And yeah, that's it from us. We will see you next week. Cheers.